Welcome to the World Championship Air Race Podcast, giving you the behind-the-scenes look into the World Championship Air Race. My name is Alex MacPhail, and I'll be chatting to guests from the air racing community all around the world. Make sure to subscribe on your podcast platform to keep up to date with our latest releases. Now fasten your seatbelts, prepare for takeoff, and let's get airborne. My name is Alex MacPhail, and today we have Jimbo Reed, who is the technical advisor for the World Championships Air Race. He's been involved in the Red Bull Air Race series for many, many years. I'm excited to get involved in some technical questions. Jimbo, thanks for joining us. Thanks for your time today.
My pleasure. It's fantastic to be here. Excited to get these things rolling again.
Yeah, that is exciting. And you've got a very prominent silhouette. People don't mistake you. That beautiful beard sticking out there. It's wonderful to have a bit of a trademark about you. Tell me, how long have you had a beard?
I don't know exactly. I think somewhere around 2009 or 10 or something. I was working with Bechenier.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been a while now.
Yeah, it's a part of you now. I mean, I'm not able to grow such an impressive beard, so I look at big beards and I think, wow, that's quite a cool thing to have. But sadly, not for me. But Jimbo, let's go back a little bit. You are all things technical. You know, as we were discussing earlier off air, the Ross Brawn of air racing, which is it's wonderful, and certainly there's been quite a demand. People have been asking lots of questions on the various social platforms. We'll get into some of those things. But where did aviation get into your blood? You know, if you go back to being a youth, 15, 16, 17 years old, were you thinking about careers, etc.? How did aviation come across your radar?
Yeah, it was well before teenage years. My father built a home-built biplane over the course of 14 years when I was growing up. So from the time I was 4 or 5, Mom would kick me out of the house to go help Dad. And so it was everything. There's all things airplanes, model airplanes, building the full-scale airplane, going out to the airport on the weekend and going for an hour smash about. And then it never really dawned on me that it would be a career at all. It was just something fun. And I went and worked on construction on grain elevators for 5 or 6 years, which was insanely hard physical work. And it was apparent that my body wasn't going to keep up with that for another 25 years. So we needed to find an education and find a different way to get along. And just happened to be there was an aviation maintenance program at university in my hometown. And so it just kind of all fell into place.
Okay. Did you say construction green elevators? Did I hear correctly?
Grain elevators for wheat, corn, and all these things.
So a lot of hard manual labor.
Yeah, it's extremely common in the middle of the United States. So.
Okay. All right. So what interested me there was 14 years to build an aircraft. And I suppose it's not an uncommon thing. You know, some people said about this ambitious project of building an airplane and never finish it. Some people take many years, and some people are lucky and can work through it in just a handful of years. So tell me about this 14-year love affair with building an airplane. I mean, there must have been lots of times where you thought, should we just leave it? I mean, 14 years is a long time to invest in one thing.
Yeah, it was a lot of watching my dad go through emotional trials about, one of the most vivid memories is this huge crash coming from the garage and him cussing. And it was because he'd built 2 left landing gear legs instead of a left and a right. And so frustrating. But yeah, I mean, the guy was, he was a legend. He was electrical engineer by trade, raising 3 kids, a house, car and mortgage payments, all this stuff. And so it was literally the scrapings that we could avoid putting in the collection plate at church that we would put into the airplane pool. And so it takes quite a long time.
And was it a complete home build? Was it a kit? What you said it was a biplane?
Yeah, no, it was. It was built from scratch. It's called an Acro Sport 2. Okay. So it's essentially like a Pitts without a canopy with a straight upper wing. And so everything from scratch. So very first memories of helping along with it was 16th inch mahogany plywood for all the gussets and the wing ribs. And you get a razor saw, and by hand you need to cut these tiny little triangles, and we have 2 wings and 40 ribs in each wing, and each one gets 2 triangles. So it's just, and then... Yeah. Those aren't the only gussets, so it's a lot of time with the razor saw for sure.
And that's a lot of detail as well. But I mean, I've always had this fascination with the Pitts and aircraft that, the Christian Eagle as well, that looked like Pitts, these sort of the biplanes that are short and stubby and can roll well and perform well. Is this another similar example?
Yeah, exactly. It's essentially just a two-place pits with a straight upper wing.
Okay.
It's essentially the same airplane. So yeah, tons of fun. Wind in your hair. You get to hear the rolling wires and flying wires screaming at you if you point it at the ground. It's just super fun.
Okay, around sort of 160 horsepower engine kind of thing, 200 horse?
It is. It's a 0320. So it's 160 horsepower, fuel injected, but it's not terribly powerful compared to race planes and whatnot, but it is great fun.
Sure. Yeah, well, we're going to get to race planes in a moment. All things race planes. I just want to spend a bit more time here on this. So, did you get to fly this aircraft yourself as well? After the 14 years it was finished, who flew it?
My dad flew it when it was completed. I was just graduating high school and not really with a reliable sense of direction yet. So, he did all the initial flying and whatnot, and then I went for many flights with him. And then he kept talking about he was talking about he was going to sell the airplane because it was too much money and blah, blah, blah. And so I bought it from him a few years ago. So now it's safe and it won't go to some schmuck that doesn't know what he's doing with it. Yeah.
Okay, great. So this aircraft's still in the family. That's wonderful. And do you fly it now?
It's in Kansas, so not as much as I should. I'm in California, but all things, coming not long, I think, when we can all get back out and travel. Be a lot more of that going on.
So that sounds like a wonderful family journey that you did together. So was your father a pilot already, or did he become a pilot in the process of building airplanes?
He was a pilot from the time he was 16 or so. He used to do crop dusting and some other things. And then, he was just really savvy with electronics, so he never pursued it as a career. He's just a private pilot, just flies for fun.
Okay, well, great. And then, so you finish your building airplanes, finish high school, and off to go become a technician. Did you say you joined an AMO school in the local community? Yeah,
there was a aviation maintenance school at Kansas State Salina, at their aviation campus, and it's Part 147 school. And so it was 2 years of all the aircraft maintenance courses, and then I spent another 2 years there with math and English to, roll it into a bachelor's degree and try to have something more marketable.
Well, I mean, how did that course go for you? So 2 years, I mean, you've spent 14 years building airplanes. Okay, so you're not doing it day and night, but I mean, I'm sure there was lots of stretches where you worked at this for long stretches at a time. Did you find it easy, having had that experience of building an airplane already?
A lot of it, the terminology and the, all the physics of flight and all that stuff, that was all really familiar to me. The bit that was challenging is the FARs, they call them, Federal Aviation Regulations. So all this stuff that's written at like a 14th grade level that, massive paragraphs on a page that you read the whole thing, and there's only 2 or 3 words that are important in there, and it's just, it was kind of painful going through that stuff. But, like I said, with the working grain elevators construction for, 5 or 6 years, I was extremely motivated to do a good job and to not screw it up. So I didn't ever have to go back to doing that again. I mean, so I got, I put in a ton of effort and got quite good results out of it. So.
And were you a kind of a guy in the class, in the course, where people would turn to when did they know your background coming in? Hey, I mean, you've built airplanes, so what is this thing? What is that thing? Help us through this coursework.
I mean, I had a lot of the simplistic answers, the beginnings of the courses that the guys were looking for. What is an aileron? How do you pronounce, aileron? What is, all these things. So that was something that the guys did come and ask. There's a lot of guys that were far more versed than I was at, internal combustion engines and electronics and all these things. And so all of us would leech off those guys just the same. Sure. Whichever person seemed to have the strongest grasp on whatever it was we were supposed to be doing.
Sure. And did you go back to back from doing this technical training, the aircraft maintenance organization, into the bachelor's degree, or was there a bit of a pause going to work and then come back and bolt on the degree?
Yeah, no, I went straight into it, just straight through the 4 years. I was working as a aircraft maintenance technician for the flight school there. So it's a mechanic school and a flight school. And so I was helping maintain all the flight side airplanes as a kind of a part-time job. They'd let me, work around my class hours and all that stuff. So real kind of hands-on experience at the same time finishing up.
It's a nice way to
bachelor's
do
degree.
it. Yeah, I mean, when you're in the rhythm of studying, that's often something that the guys do. They finish either their PPL or their commercial, or they get their Air Force wings. Or you just throw them on the next thing. Say, look, you're in the rhythm of studying now. Just keep going.
Yeah.
And just stick your head down for another 6 months, a year, 2 years, and finish up as far as you can, because you've got the energy and you almost study fit, as it were.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, familiar with the process and kind of the expectations and all that stuff. Yeah.
So along the way,
once
then,
you get
Jimbo,
them,
where did the sort of flying? I know you did some flying with your dad, but did you have a PPL at that point, or when did the actual formal flying training work?
that was just kind of to your point. I was so comfortable in the system at Kansas State that I thought, why not, stay there and get my private pilot's license. I'd flown a bunch, obviously not logging any of the time prior to that, but yeah, I stuck around for a 5th year and got my private pilot's license. And that was partially because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and partially because there was an airplane called the Global Flyer that was there. Steve Fawcett flew around the world, and actually landed in Bournemouth on our 2nd around the world trip.
Is that the Virgin one?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was a volunteer on that for like 3 years.
That's fascinating. What was your role there? Were you the technician on that?
I was one of them, yeah. So there was 8 of us that had fairly high GPAs in college, and we volunteered. They said, hey, this airplane's coming here. It's going to, take off and do some world records. And we didn't know what the scope of our involvement would be. We were hoping it wasn't just like getting coffee and sweeping the floor. And it turned out to be amazing, an amazing experience. So it was everything, kind of extreme performance, turbine engine and composite manufacturing and repair, and a bunch of flight test stuff, and everything. Just 13 fuel tanks and all these different capacitance probes, and trying to figure out what the calibrations for all the probes are, and where's the fuel at, and where's it moving. And just for almost 3 years did that. So I volunteered for 3 months. Then kind of everybody left, graduated, the other guys that were helping out. And I stuck around to do the 5th year for my private. And Steve Fawcett called me up and asked me if I wanted to work for him, around school, because he had a couple more records coming up. I said, sure, I've got nothing going on. And so, yeah, started this grand adventure. Eventually wound up, hanging that airplane in the Smithsonian. And then the guys that built it were from Scale Composites, and they say, you should come out to the desert. We're building spaceships out there. Shit. All right, let's do that. And so
I'm going to interrupt you there for a moment, Jimbo. This sounds like a Hollywood feature film. The story's just unpacking here. This is wonderful. But to go back to your point, so was Steve then from Kansas as well? You met him through a vicinity. You were just in the same circle.
No, he's from Chicago. He was a commodities broker up there. The dude had the world record for having the most world records. Right. This is the kind of dude he is. So anyway, he got this airplane built by Scaled Composites, and then was looking for a place to launch from and recover to. And he's he's passed on now, but he was super big into STEM and education and Boy Scouts and these kinds of things. And so going to university, and he was a penny pincher. So going to university, having a bunch of students help where they could, and then not having to pay them made a lot of sense for Mr. Fawcett. So he ended up coming to Kansas because if you have some problem when the airplane's super heavy, you've got 4 or 5 hours of United States before you are out over the ocean, and the same thing coming back. If you have some issue, you've got land under your feet well before you're planning to need it. So.
Okay, so fortunate timing and a whole bunch of things, but the point I like to stress here is that a lot of people have these sort of passings and meet people along the way, but not everyone goes for it. I mean, you had no idea what you're signing up for, and it's wonderful that you sign up for a 3-month thing, and 3 years later you're still involved. I mean, that's just great. You obviously showed your worth. You've done the job that they wanted from you, but then obviously they saw something. Then, hey, well, you did that well, Jimbo. So how about you do this too? And that so it grows.
Yeah, certainly, and that's one of the things that I try not to think about too much, but definitely confounds my understanding of the universe and how things work, is just how these kind of stepping stones get just chucked in front of you, and you don't know what it's for or why. But that's shit that whatever constraints in the universe forced you to go do this thing right now, or this seems like the fun thing right now, and yeah, it blossoms into some other amazing thing. So
Okay, well, that sounds an amazing project to be involved with a global flyer. Okay, so did you spend most of the time being in Kansas and working on, as you mentioned, all the different fuel tanks, etc., or did you spend a lot of time going on the journey with them?
Yeah, both. So we launched out. Well, the first flight was Salina, Kansas, nonstop back to Salina, Kansas. So we just hung out there and waited for updates and whatever, and waited for 3 days for the airplane to come back. The second one, we dispatched to Florida. We were taking off out of Kennedy Space Center. We were going to go all the way around the planet and then back over the Atlantic again. And we were supposed to land in Manston, Kent. And we had a starter generator failure just as we were crossing the west coast of the UK. And so we ended up diverting to Bournemouth, which Mr. Fawcett was familiar with and been there a lot of times, and slightly more improved landing spot than Kent and Manston. But yeah, so for that, on that instance, we launched him out, packed up all the gear, went and got on a Virgin Atlantic flight to Gatwick, hung out there for a day or two, waited for him to arrive. The airplane came back, landed in Bournemouth with like 2 blown tires, a broken aileron hinge, a failed starter generator, piss everywhere in the airplane, a whole bunch of other issues. So I ended up staying in the UK for about a month, getting the airplane fit to ferry back to the States. We were going to do one more record, Salina, Kansas to Salina, Kansas, but in this big zigzag kind of flight path so that we could get the absolute distance record.
Okay, what was that absolute distance? Did you get it?
Yeah, it was held by the Voyager prior. So Dick Rutan and Jeannie Yeager in the 80s had that record. And then, Fawcett went out and snatched it up.
Well, that's great. It's nice to be part of something great. I mean, even just the ambition and getting involved in the beginning stages will be exciting, but to be involved and continue to be involved and part of the team that actually breaks these records, it must have been an amazing feeling to just be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. And to be immersed in, as good as universities try to do it, having hands-on equipment for students to learn and play with, having no kidding, cutting-edge engineering, flop up on the ramp, and the guys, the program engineer and the crew chief there to explain it all and to, take the time. It was a really massive learning experience, and you don't really notice it. Yeah, that the airplane's new and different, and then they say go do this composite repair and do it like this, blah blah blah, and then I don't know, you just assume everybody knows that, right? Just, I was the last one to know that apparently, and then you go out in the world and you're like, well, yeah, just do the repair like Phil said, and they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, Jason, get out of the way, just so you absorb a bunch of this information, but not necessarily archive it, and now I'm this composite wizard or something. It's that's not how you feel at all. But after a couple of years being around really, really smart people, just through osmosis or whatever it is, something leaches in there. So.
Well, that's great. Okay, so then let's take this step before we go back to racing. We're going to talk about race planes too, Jimbo, but you mentioned scaled composites now too. Mm-hmm. So come out here, we're building rockets. I mean, that will get any sort of adrenaline-fueled person who's got a bit of ambition's attention. So, wow.
Yeah, that was the Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2 program. So when I got out here, they were building wing tools for the mothership, spar tools and wingskin tools, and the spaceship was just starting along. And that was in 2006. So, and I was there about 4 years. So we got through first flight of the mothership and a few of the glide flights in the spaceship. Had a couple setbacks along the way. But yeah, it was interesting, comparatively, an interesting project because just the load that the airplane sees and the environment that it exists in is insane. So just if you imagine just the pressure test for the cabin, because it's a pressurized vehicle, is 36 psi, and it's 12 feet long, 15 feet long, and it's 90-inch diameter, tube of carbon, and it's essentially 4-core-4, so it's 4 plies, a bit of core, and then 4 more plies, and that's 36 psi, which is absolutely insane. And everything is like that. The main oxidizer tank is all wound carbon tank holding 800 psi in a just this just big barrel tank.
Yeah.
The motor bolts straight onto the valve on the back of the tank, and all of the thrust load from the motor goes through the tank, and out the skin of the tank is attached to the airplane. So it's pushing like on the bulkhead, holding all the pressure to send you to space. And it's still not like the pressurized load from inside is far greater than the thrust load from the motor.
Wow.
And it all works out, but it was some pretty crazy subject matter coming from build an insanely light airplane with with nothing extra to holy shit, everything in this atmosphere or in this environment is trying to kill us. So we need a very robust airplane. So
sure. Now, I mean, just this kind of conversation, the kind of detail that you do in your day-to-day work, there's not too many people in the world you can have, just a conversation about the level of high tech and high risk tolerance for safety, etc. This is really, really select. You're the top edge of the ziggurat here. And what was the bit that not attracted you in, but attracted them to say, come out this way? Was it specifically working in the carbon, or where was the unique skill where they saw value in you?
No, I think it was just having worked with them for a couple years, both hand in hand and then remotely when I was working on the Global Flyer. Those guys would go back to California, and I'd be on the phone with them asking them what to do with this, or how to make this the way they wanted, or whatever the case may be. And I think it was just I don't know, hadn't had with some direction I can go, had proven myself to be able to go do essentially whatever they asked, right? And they were smart enough not to ask me to do things that I shouldn't be doing. But I don't know, they were looking for people, need to find 500 people that want to come build spaceships, and so why not?
And it's it's not only just building spaceships, but I mean, I can remember, because at a time I was just getting going and flying when this was all in the buzz in the media, etc. And a whole new way, a whole new approach to spaceships and re-entry to Earth, and it was just, mind blowing comes to mind.
Yeah, no, it is. It was definitely a step change in the philosophy behind who can go and what it takes to go to space, which is super cool. If you watch the Black Sky movie about Spaceship One, Mike Melville on the first rocket flight, I think, losing all of the not the heads-up display, but all the MFD in front of him all goes black, and I don't know. He it's so amazing that there was a ping pong ball hanging on a string, and you could get your attitude information, your rate information off a ping pong ball on a string. It should be hanging straight down to your face from the cockpit, right? And so it was directly in front of him. And with all the MFD stuff, everything gone, he just, flew the ping pong ball for another 200,000 feet straight up and Mach 2, by hand.
Which, I mean, the most basic, a 99-cent ping pong on a string, high-tech, the most high-tech spaceship there is, flying on a $1 item.
Yeah, and that's the most reliable instrument in the whole airplane,
Yeah.
Just to hang around with these guys and people that think kind of in those terms or to those ends, is really a phenomenal experience.
Yeah, well, it sounds amazing, and an amazing opportunity. And again, I stress the point that so the opportunity is there, but it's up to you to make a go of it. And it sounds like you stuck around a long time there, and you got stuck in. Which, what an amazing journey! Obviously, with all that experience, I mean, there's not a lot of people with that kind of experience. Tell me then the transition from this to now getting involved in air racing. Where did you start your journey on air racing?
It was from Scaled Composites. So in about 2008, I think, the winter of 8, Paul Bonham approached Scaled about doing some composite modifications to his airplane, smaller canopy and cowling and wing root fairings, wheel pants, the whole schmear really. And Scaled told him no, because it would, take too long. It would be too expensive. It probably wouldn't make him that much faster, whatever. And at the time, a good friend of mine, engineer from Scaled, and I had been to see the Red Bull Air Race in San Diego. We flew a Grumman Tiger down there the 2 years prior to watch the race, and so we were excited about it anyway. And then, we hear text come up and told me, he said, hey, somebody named Paul Bonham was here, and he's a Red Bull pilot, and he wants to make his airplane fast. It's like, sweet, are we going to do it? And they were like, no. I said, well, that's bullshit. We should find a way to like get involved. And so it went to another guy on the field, John Sharp, legendary racer, Reno racer. All fast airplane stuff comes from his brain, essentially, and his team. And so it went to him, and I just made myself kind of a pain in the ass to go down and bang on the hangar door. You know, I just wanted to see the airplane. I'd never seen an Edge 540 before, you know, or never touched one. And, you know, do you need some help? No, we don't need any help. It's like, okay, so the next day I go bang on the door. You need some help? No, don't need. And so eventually they let me in, and I worked, volunteered for 3 months over the winter with Bonham's crew chief at the time, is a good dude named Wade Hammond. And so helped him out like every day, like no kidding, every day after work, and then on Saturdays and Sundays, like no days off. And because it's an extremely compressed schedule, shit ton of work. And so helped them for 3 months. And I was very happy just to have the experience and work alongside these guys and, you know, just kind of whatever, just learn more stuff. And
so is the kind of work, sorry, Jimbo, is the kind of work you're talking about then fairings and, you know, wingtips and that kind of stuff that they came to ask Scaled about in the beginning?
Yeah. So, Scaled didn't want to do it because they're a big company, essentially. John Sharp is really good at all that stuff. So, yeah, it was a whole new cowling, small canopy, new turtle deck. I don't think we did wingtips at that time. We did wing root fairings, did a shorter landing gear, did wheel pants, did just a weight reduction campaign. Just a ton of work to try to smash into a few months. Engine plenum, new, you know, all the cooling drag stuff sorted out. And yeah, so at the end of that, Bonham just asked me, he says, hey, do you like to come with us to Abu Dhabi as, you know, kind of reward for helping out? And I said, sure, let's go there. You know, where is that? And so that's ended up working a few races with Mr. Bonham that year, and then ended up working for Bechenier the next year. And then in answer to your question, sorry, it takes 10 minutes, but Scaled eventually, after I was doing Scaled full time, and I was doing Red Bull as well. And then after a couple of years, they said, you know what, you have a pretty tough decision coming up. You're going to have to decide what you're going to do, if you're going to stay in Mojave or if you're going to go travel around the world with all your friends. All right. And so see you later. And then I went to work for Virgin. Were they hoping to
snag you? Do you think their intention with that conversation was to say, all right, I'll put the playing aside and let's focus on spaceships, etc.?
Yeah, I'm sure that's what their intent was, but I'm not wired to sit in one place forever, really. But
sure. See you later.
Yeah, exactly. And so I went across the parking lot to the Spaceship Company, which is Virgin Galactic's U.S. entity. And yeah, carried on there as a manufacturing engineer for, I think it was there 8 years or something. And eventually they got tired of it as well and said, you know, you have a tough decision coming up. And so, so now I'm in Santa
I just want to
Cruz.
pause there for a moment. So this idea of you know, stepping out of Scaled, but there isn't a full-time job yet for you with Bechenier at this point, or any race team. It's not a full-time job.
No, for sure not. No, it's other than you think about racing all the time. You work on anything you can bring home with you in your suitcase. You know, coordinating, networking, engine builds, and whatever the newest, latest, best thing is to try to get, you know, to the next race to put on the airplane. But no, certainly not a. I always kind of equated it to an 8-race season was about a third of a full-time job, something like that, you know?
Okay.
So,
all right. So that is actually quite a tough decision. I mean, while you can follow your passions, you still have to put food on the table.
Totally. Yeah, I just, I don't know. I try not to get worried about that kind of stuff, you know? I was, and to be delivered an ultimatum from someplace that I'd put in years and years and tons of effort, you know, was kind of a turnoff as well. And that company was Scaled when I got there was 120 people. It was very family oriented. It was, you know, Bert Rutan was still there. Mike Melville was still there. It was still hold Scaled. And by the time I left, it was, you know, becoming bigger company. It was bought out by Northrop. And so it became less and less the cool garage, awesome, you know, RC airplane kind of mad scientist environment, and more regulated, more and more time clocks and, just all that stuff that isn't that much fun.
Okay, it didn't suit you. But okay, so now you've joined you're more familiar and you're regular. And so obviously you said 8 years. The next crowd, you have to now buy some time off them, and they gave you the same ultimatum again, or similar. At what point is this going to be, you can get more involved in Red Bull air racing rather than just being on the team side, but then you get involved in the sort of the actual sports side of the regulator body, technical advisor level?
Yeah, that was I think 4 years into it or something. I'd worked for Ivanov, Besnier, and Bonham, and that all came about from I wasn't satisfied, and a bunch of the other competitors weren't satisfied about the level of technical scrutiny.
Okay.
Where it all boiled over, or where the conversation started, I guess, where I got really frustrated was in Croatia, and I don't remember 2000. I don't even recall 14 or something, and there was transponder antenna. It's a kind of a remote control sized backup timing antenna, and it was supposed to be mounted on the gear leg, which is just zip tied out there on the spring the spring aluminum gear. It looks ugly. It's not faired in. It's not aerodynamic. Blah blah blah. And I brought it up early in the race week. It was like, hey, Hannes Ark's transponder antenna and Nigel Lamb's transponder antenna are not like everyone else's. Everybody else is out on the gear leg. They had theirs kind of tucked up in the fairing, right up at the root of the gear leg where it meets the fuselage. And it says in the rules, it must be equal drag.
Sure.
Obviously not. And so I said, hey, this is not cool. You guys should make them move their fairing or move their antenna. And they said, we'll think about it. And then they let everybody race anyway. And so I filed a technical protest afterward. And I said, this is not right. These ones aren't like those ones. And the point wasn't to fix the antenna. The point was that there was some inability to make a decision and stick by it and have like enough spine to say, no, this is the way it is. Either move it or you're not racing. That didn't exist very much. And so whatever the protest went through, it was denied because I don't remember. I didn't have it in within 5 minutes of the airplane landing or some ridiculous bureaucratic thing. But anyway, what it did do is kind of put a spotlight on the fact that we had a technical team, and ever since the original technical director died, the scrutiny had come way, way, way down, and people were pretty much free to get away with not complying with the rules if they want, because nobody was checking. The only people that were checking were the other techs looking at your stuff,
Yeah.
So whatever the kind of the rest of that season, a few more of those instances where, whatever, this is illegal per the rules, or the rules contradict themselves, or whatever it was. And then Sergio, one of the old Avi guys at Red Bull, asked me if I wanted to be the technical director, or asked me if I'd consider it. And I said, sure. He says, but you have to move to Austria. I said, well, I'm obviously not doing that. He said, well, you can't do the job then. I said, okay. And then the next year went by, and it was the same, very technically loose. And then it had got turned in. I don't know. I'd done my best to make a giant stink about it because I wanted all of our work to actually be reflected in results and not have that screwed, because somebody else doesn't want to play by the rules or whatever, or isn't as good as cheat, or is a better cheat than I am, whatever. So eventually they called me back the next year and they said, hey, we want you to do the job. You don't have to move to Austria. I said, fantastic. Let's try it out. So that kind of, started the whole, operations on the dark side instead of the race team side, which is great fun. I enjoy it.
And obviously, well, not obviously, were you required then to leave the team if you're going to go onto the technical director side?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't go back, essentially. So it was a bit of a jump off the bridge kind of thing, just because as soon as you're in that circle of information now, we know everybody's secrets, like all of the teams, So I know what every little box in all the airplanes is, all the ones that, they don't hide extremely well. I know what they all do, what they're all for, and like the configuration management of the airplanes is a known thing. So if you do, whatever, step onto this side, then you can't, it doesn't make sense to be able to go back to a race team with everybody else's secret.
So was that an easy decision for you to go across, or did you have to give it some thought knowing you're leaving the team environment?
There was a tiny bit of trepidation because the team environment is super fun. You're worried about one airplane. You're not worried about 17 or whatever it was. But at the same time, the competition side of it, at least the technical side of it, was really scattered, and I thought I could help rein it in a bit. I don't have a problem telling people no. Hurt feelings usually don't sway my opinion, one way or the other. You can be upset about whatever the rule is, but that's the rule. What do you want to do? So
yeah, today isn't the debate for the rule. Today is to stick to the rule. We can debate the rule next week.
Yeah, exactly. So my favorite, I loved the sparring back and forth and the excited discussion about rules, potential rules, whether this is in compliance or it's not. I really love this kind of philosophical back and forth and technical back and forth. But at the end of the day, when I'm tired of talking about it, then I would just say, do you want to participate in this Red Bull Air Race event?
Yeah.
And if they say yes, then go do what we talked about. It's super simple.
The buck stops at you. Can you give me an example of something? Because this is quite fascinating, because I often think I enjoy watching the Formula One as well. And obviously there's a lot in common with top tier racing on the ground versus in the air here and air racing. Give me an example of a kind of thing where you were surprised. The rules seemed clear. Everyone read it on your side of the table. Everyone read it and made sense. And then the team came with something, but actually they had a good point. And you maybe had to say, well, are they in compliance? Even though we read it this way, they read it that way. And we have to say, look, they've got a point.
Yeah. No, I can give you a really good one. Right about the time I started, and it's a good one because Nigel Lamb's not racing anymore, but one of the things the pilots wanted in 2015, I think, 16, I can't remember, whenever I started the technical director thing, one of my rules or proposed rules that we put into the operations manual was that there not be automatic mixture control, right? So no auto throttle, no auto mixture. The propeller, we have some systems that we allow on the airplane to manage finite RPM control. But the mixture was one that is more... it's potentially fatal to the airplane if that system screws up. So it's not going to be allowed. We're not going to do that. Now, getting proper mixture is like vital to, having your airplane perform the track. It's probably probably the critical adjustment, Sure. But Nigel Lamb came to me and he pulled me aside after this meeting and he said, hey, I've got this thing that goes on the mixture that I want you to look at. I was like, there is no automatic mixture. I don't know why you can't hear what we just talked about. What's going on? He's like, well, no, you keep saying automatic mixture. What this is a cam that runs on the mixture, on the mixture control arm on the side of the throttle body, and it has a little cam and a little spring that drops down in this detent, and you can feel when you've got the mixture you want, selected. So you go out, fly around, set the mixture to whatever, 24 gallons an hour, come back, take the cowling off, move the little cam to where the detent and the spring are all lined up. And then when you go out blasting off tomorrow, you can just by feel put the mixture where it goes. And his point was, this is not automatic mixture. This is mixture position indication. There's nothing, sure. He's still moving it with his hand. And, I thought about it for a bit and I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. So congratulations, enjoy your mixture thingy, and I was grouping all things that touch the mixture control into one lot, which they're not. So,
yeah, well, I like that. It's a great example, Jimbo. Thanks. And it also, it shows that we've got to be open-minded to things. But I'm curious,
certainly,
other than the fact that you can set it quickly, what is the benefit in the race config? Because surely you've got a couple of minutes before you get going. Saving 3 seconds, 20 seconds, how much difference does that make?
Yeah, it's, I think the time is actually a lot more compressed than that. So in the couple minutes that they're flying out, they're doing G warm-ups, getting the seatbelts cinched down, getting their head right, running through the track in their mind, setting the prop, setting the mixture, making sure they're in the right place, trying to keep eyes on the traffic, all these things they're doing. And the mixture is just notoriously, everybody used a lambda sensor, O2 sensor, to set as close to the optimum mixture as you could. And these sensors are just tragically bouncy. When you watch the reading, it's jumping around, a half a point or a whole point. And if you're looking for 14.3, it's hard to say, if you've got it or not, if it's showing you 15 and 12 and 13 and, whatever, it's all bouncing around. So there was definitely an advantage to just being able to not give a shit what the lambda indication was saying, because we went out yesterday for 20 minutes and we made sure exactly, what we wanted. So it definitely was an advantage for sure.
And did the other teams take on this as well? Did this become a common feature?
Yeah, a few of them saw it, and then we telling tales out of school, but then their technician at the time was kind of backhanded selling them out of the bottom of the toolbox when nobody was watching, make a couple $100 here and there.
Oh, it's fun. It's great to get the inside scoop of some of these things. Well, some of the questions that the fans of the show and the World Champs Air Race Series have been asking. So, what parts of the aircraft are the teams allowed to modify, and has it changed? The follow-on is what has changed from the Red Bull Air Race Series to the now World Championship Air Race Series?
As far as the rules go, it's very similar. So we're trying to stand up a known envelope, one that there's been just zillions of hours of history with. So we're trying to essentially start out where we left off as far as technical matters are concerned. So there's a few things you cannot modify. So primary flight controls, no major modifications, anything underneath the lock wire on the motor. So there's valve covers are lock wired on, cylinders, sump, and accessory case all lock wired on. You're not supposed to fiddle with anything inside that. Propeller is pretty much off limits. You're allowed to blend the leading edge erosion shield into the blade a little bit with some, 400 grit or whatever sandpaper, but it's essentially not to be messed with. Otherwise, it's pretty open. It's, of course, done under the, or within the constraints of being legal and being airworthy. So,
sure.
If you come up with an idea for, 5-foot tall winglets or something, it's probably not going to make it on the airplane. But, new, fairings, the aero mods. So the power plant's pretty much set. The aero mods, cooling, drag, aero, and just straight aerodynamic stuff on the airplane is where a bunch of the teams seem to. It's where there's a lot of room to play, I guess.
The most sort of aerodynamics, and that obviously relates to drag and relates to your performance, your speed, etc.
Certainly, yeah. So try to make the air think the airplane is as small as possible. No straight lines if you can avoid it. It's really remarkable how much you can gain or lose just through the cooling drag, the air running through the engine. It's really remarkable.
Maybe just spend a moment there. You said what you can gain or lose through there?
Yeah.
The cooling?
So the air, just the cooling drag, so just the air running through to cool the engine is massive amount of performance gain or loss, depending on what you know about it and how much work you've put into it. Teams.
And why is that? Is that the size of the scoop coming in, or the disturbance as it comes through the inlet, or is it the stuff that happens inside the cowling?
Yeah, it's all of it. So having the inlets and outlets sized properly so that you're not flowing excess air in where you don't have to. Having the inlets, and if you size the inlet wrong as well, you'll get air that actually kind of hits a dam and starts flowing back forward out of the cowling and screwing up all the aerodynamic stuff you've tried to do with the outside of the cowling. The plugging all the little holes and leak paths around the cooling fins on the engine is a huge thing. Having all the hoses and all the crap on the bottom of the motor kind of out of the way or faired so that the air is happier when it's cruising by. You put what they call a piccolo tube up in the top of the cowling, and you get the pressure drop across the the inlet side of the cowl, and then you put another one at the bottom and see what your pressure recovery is, so you can a lot cleverer guys than I can figure out what the exit velocity of the cooling air is, and you want that to match as close as you can to the aircraft speed. The gap, a really cool one, the gap around the crankshaft, just after the prop, so where the cowling goes around the crank, that's all on the high pressure side. Air coming in the inlets will take a turn and it'll go straight back out where the prop is, and when it does, it'll put out this huge, essentially an air brake. So it's just all this air being jetted out right behind the prop, right in front of the airplane you spent all this time trying to make swoopy, and you're essentially just shooting yourself in the foot because you didn't put some little seal around the crankshaft, right? And
okay, so then you've done all this work on the canopy, but you've killed it in the front.
Everything, yeah.
Okay, so this cooling air drag is the bit where you're going to go first. I mean, you're going to tick that box before you start trying to put a cowling on the vertical stabilizer, etc.
I think all the other stuff is a lot easier to kind of hold your thumb out there and say, yeah, that'll be about right. The cooling drag is once you've been through it a few times, is pretty understood, but it's also, you find big gains and big losses in the most unexpected places. So it is a bit of, still there's some voodoo in there somewhere. I'm not sure exactly how it all works.
I'm gonna show my ignorance a little bit here. So I presume that you work out your cooling drag for your airframe and engine and propeller combination, and let's say you manage to get it targeted nicely by the second race. You don't fiddle with that again, or is this something the guys are going to tweak right until the last race?
I think it can always be better, and the guys that have that same kind of pit of the stomach feeling are the guys that put a bunch of work into it and consequently get it working a lot better than other guys that happen to just stumble on, this is what, Kirby's cowling looks like. This is what we should build a cowling to look like, right? So, okay. But the guys that put the effort in are leaps and bounds ahead of the other guys. And it's kind of comical from my side to know all these things and to just see them, fiddling with all the wrong stuff for race after race after race after race. It's just like, oh my God, you guys, just open your eyes.
Well, we're not going to name and shame anybody, but I mean, it must be interesting having the insight that you have, and you can just see probably from a glance with your technical experience and background that, or you can just get a snapshot view of this aircraft and say, well, I could just do this thing next. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's, if I had known all of the things that I know now, back when I was a technician for a race team, we would have never lost a race. We would have won every single race.
Wow.
I had no qualms about cheating whatsoever. That was like my sole purpose in life, was figuring out a better, more clever, more infallible way to cheat. I love it.
Yeah, push it right to the edge.
Right,
so,
right
this
beyond the edge.
Covers, this discussion kind of covers it, but maybe there was something more as well. For me, it seemed like the cooling air drag is quite a specific thing to focus on. But when you're in air racing, another question from one of the listeners: what is the hardest technical challenge when it comes to racing? Building a pedigree race plane.
Shoot, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of them. The hardest technical challenge is probably, at least from my side, I'm probably biased because of my experience, but building, all the components in the airplane, the ones that you modify, and just modifying everything and piling a bunch of stuff on the airplane, but keeping it light, and keeping it at the minimum weight or below is it's like the cooling drag voodoo. It's just an immense challenge that's never over. So you go in and, take all the zip ties out and you put string tie back instead, and all the thick washers come out and all thin ones go in. And it's not terribly, I guess, technically challenging. It's just a massive project that's never done. You know, it's yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know what the most technically challenging bit would be.
Well, if I could summarize your thoughts that you just shared now, it seems to be that keeping on top of and keeping track of all the little bits and pieces, such that when you assemble this thing, it is a pedigree, you know, all the little washers, all the string ties, etc. Keeping your head about what little changes work in combination and where we are in that, I don't know, development phase, etc.
Yeah, I think it's just an attitude. You just have to understand that we're out here to race, and so we're never done. You know, the job is kind of eternal, because if you, you know, if you're standing still, if you're happy with your airplane, oh, it's sweet, let's leave it just like that, then immediately you're moving backwards because everybody else is still working. And what looks great today and works great today is not going to work tomorrow or the next day. I mean, maybe if you're lucky, but it's not the way it goes usually.
Yeah, I had a great conversation with Juan Velade last year where he was saying, look, if you're not improving, if you're standing still, you're going backwards. Exactly that point. And it just makes me think about one of the things that he mentioned with his race team, you know, 2 years back, was the water cooling. Is that something that the teams can experiment with freely?
They can. They could up until at least the last time we were racing. I don't know if that's going to be allowed to continue. Or I have fairly strong opinions about it. I actually have, in a half an hour, I have a Zoom call with the race committee to talk about just that.
To be continued.
It's undetermined at this time. I'm certainly hoping it goes away.
Why would you want it to go away? Just because it's a technical thing that's an add-on not needed?
So I kind of look at it in a evolutionary kind of frame of mind. So water cooling, you could look at a bunch of different things. So winglets are the same thing. Every kind of phase or fad that these guys get into kind of has a life cycle. So the first guys to come out with the water cooling stuff made a huge difference. We're excited about it, kept it super quiet, you know, tried to hide it on the grid stand when they were filling it up and everything. And took a couple races until people were like, what's up with that? You know, and then by the end of that season, everybody knew about water cooling. Like everything else, the guys that put a bunch of effort into it have it working a zillion times better than the guys that were like, oh, we need water cooling, put it on there, spray it on the motor. That's what they do, right? So, but at the same time, it's kind of run its life cycle. Everybody knows about it. So right now it's a bit of fiddling around, pointing nozzles where you think they should be pointed to get the most advantage from the thing. But at the end of the day, from my perspective, the idea is dead. It exists, right? It's not new and novel. It's old. It's understood. Nobody has an advantage anymore by like the secrecy level of what they're doing, right? Other than in the details. So from my perspective, from my side, it's an extra electrical draw on the system, which we have a limited amount of power to run everything we need to run. It's excess EMI, electromagnetic interference, screws up the data links and all the information we're going to be beaming down to the ground. It gets us closer to the max aerobatic weight of the airplanes, which is a federal rule, right? It's like no ship manufacturer's recommendation or manufacturer's mandated, envelope. So there's no screwing around with that. I don't know. I would argue that it, probably puts cold spots on the cylinders, which who knows if that's good or bad. It doesn't sound good, and in my kind of philosophy about this whole thing is I am totally on board 100% with innovation and experimentation, figuring this stuff out, but we're not going to go do stuff that's brand new or is kind of runs against safety. We're not going to go prototype new stuff on the airplane out on the track. You do that at home with your airplane, 5,000 foot above your local runway. That's where you do that kind of stuff. So it needs to be very well understood, and it needs to be proven as airworthy and safe before we're going to go stick it on an airplane and go blasting about above people's heads.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fair enough. And you've given me quite a nice detailed answer there. Jimbo, it's been fascinating talking to you. Last 3 quick rapid fire questions before we wrap it up. So at the end of the race weekend, all said and done, airplanes packed in the hangar. What is your go-to meal?
Oh man, it depends on the country. If we were hanging out in Europe somewhere, it'd be goose liver, something amazing. You know, you can't get enough liver in the States. I don't know.
Interesting.
I really have an affinity for it. And so if you go to like Hungary, they had this amazing goose liver with a little slice of apple on top, some caramelized onion, just to die for.
Oh. Sounds amazing. You're making me hungry right now. Great answer. Second question, what is the most underrated aircraft that you've flown? You look at this thing, you think, well, I'm not so sure about it, but when you got in, it just was such a nice thing to fly. You know, it's easy to see a plane that flies well, looks well and flies well, but sometimes they look bad, they fly bad. What was the underrated one you've flown?
The one that comes to mind would be an L-29, so a two-seat trainer jet. So Mike Mangold had one that he raced at Reno. Me and a buddy of mine built some wingtips for it. And then we had to go test the wingtips. So we needed to go out to 400 or 500 mile an hour and go pull 6G and see that they stay on the airplane. And I don't know if you're familiar with what an L-29 looks like, but it is tragic. You know, the only
looks a bit fat and sluggish. It does.
It's appalling, right? It's like the only, I don't want to disparage the English and their designing abilities in most things other than the Spitfire, but it's a tragedy. And then went and jumped in the airplane with him, and I'd never flown in a tandem jet before, and so we blasted off. He had a bigger motor in it than it had stock, and we were doing 5,000 foot tall loops and just amazing performance compared to a Grumman Tiger or even an Edge, whatever it was. And when I landed and we climbed out all sweaty and breathing hard, that was the sexiest airplane I've ever seen in my life. It's amazing. I don't know if you've ever done a 5,000 foot tall loop, but you should try it.
Well, that's an amazing story. Thanks, Jimbo. Yeah, I mean, I've often looked at that. Well, there used to be an aerobatic team in South Africa with the L-29s, and it looks a bit kind of sluggish. Certainly, we had 5,000 feet elevation to start with, and hot and high. It's underpowered, but I mean, great answer so far. So 3 for 3. Let's go for it. What is your aircraft that you would own, regardless of costs or any implications about it, if you could own one aircraft for the rest of your life? Which one?
B-26 Marauder. That's a twin-engine light or medium bomber. My grandpa flew in the war, and they're super fast. I think that'd be the one to have.
Okay, well, look, I think so far so good. I think you've given the most interesting answers of the rapid fires of all the interviews so far. Jimbo, it's been fascinating talking with you. I'd love to have an opportunity to sit around a fire and continue a conversation long into the night. I think you could keep people spellbound with your stories of adventures, and certainly looking forward to 2022 season as it kicks off, and all the best with your setting up with the regulations and getting the season going again.
Thank you very much, man. The pleasure's all mine. Can't tell you how long I've been waiting to have some of these, phone calls and chats and whatnot, some meetings, just something to do, because this stuff's actually moving forward, and it is really fantastic. I'm excited for all the fans to come out and see the resurrection of fantastic sport, and I just can't wait to get going, go find some complex problems and solve them.